Welcome all who made it here. If there's any question with the English part, because most people are Portuguese, but then also foreign people in the room, if there's any question, please raise the hand and let's try to be clear for everyone, okay? Let's not make that an obstacle. So yeah, first point here is that this is a work conducted with Lydia Marupo, who is also luckily in the room. So we have worked together for some time now and worked also on the topic of YouTube in particular together. And this is where we start. We had a small an idea for a project we called Young Tubers. It never took off as a funded project. We haven't been very lucky with funding. We only work a lot in trying to publish what we research on, and I can identify this research from myself and with Lydia on three main cases here that I will present to you quickly. One is my publication about a group of YouTubers, teen YouTubers, I could say, from the first generation of YouTubers from around 2010 to 2013. It was growing, and how they were sponsored by a telecommunication brand. So that's WTF in Portugal. The second case, which has generated an article, two articles by Lydia and me, is about Sofia Beauty, now Sofia Barbosa. So around the area of girlhood, a teenage content producer, and how this is articulated with commercial discourses. And the third case is about social media and illness among young people. And we have focused on a case from Brazil, also with Rayana de Carvalho. And this is the last two publications here. And I can share the PowerPoint and links later if someone's interested. The last part of our work is actually the first reference and was something that was also a collaboration with Maria José. And this is a more practical output because it's about proposals, a proposal of activities to try to understand more critically the YouTuber's creation. So we are concerned to have more research oriented papers and also some more intervention papers in the scope that we in the scopes that we have found. For today, I will focus on publication in Portuguese. So anyone who is interested, this is open access, and I will try to share it right now in the chat. The link for the book, which includes this chapter, it's a small chapter, so that's good because we're also overwhelmed with things these days. And this is focusing on YouTube literacy for children and that adolescents. That's a term more used in the Brazilian context, or we could say for teenage people, for teenagers, yes. And what we try to do here, as Celia presented in the abstract, is to go from research, to go from the literature to first an agenda, and then try to, with that, to inspire also some intervention. So you might have seen in the last days on the news about some case where YouTubers are being, well, not prosecuted as such, but the case has made the news that they are creating content that invites users to online betting and illegal websites for betting, for bets. And this is from just last Sunday. And okay, some people this week were talking to me about this. So have you seen this? This is happening. Then the YouTubers will take down their videos. They might have some case of some fine or something. But then, oh, this is 1.5 year old at least, just this case. So this means in late 2019, there was a research by, there was this investigation by Radio Renascença. They found out that this was going on. It was a crime. It was playing between lack of regulation in online betting and also consumer protection, etc. They were not being transparent about their gains in these kinds of websites. And this happened, and now it's happening again. So it means that they knew what they were doing. And this is just an illustration about the kinds of problems, probably the scale of the gains that they have with these practices. So even though they know it's a crime, it probably pays off. Just to also to say that this is on the agenda, and these particular YouTubers are also very popular among young people. So that's a further concern. We also know that because of the environment with the pandemic, people are betting more, and they're betting more online. So for today, and to focus on media literacy, we can start off with the concept, with the basic concept by Sonia Livingston, as media literacy being the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and create messages across a variety of contexts. We don't feel that this needs more complexification at this point. And what this presentation is about is how we, Lydia and me, try to identify the main challenges that YouTube poses. Sorry, I'm trying to pick the presentation and the faces. To identify these main challenges that YouTube poses to this conscient use of the platform and its contents, to then go to a proposition about an agenda to promote literacy on YouTube. So why is this so relevant, and why do we focus on YouTube? And we have dedicated this attention that I talked about. First, this is the second most visited website in the world after Google. It is used by 1/3 of the world's population. And we also know that 1/3 of the internet users are children. So an intersection of this means that it's also very used by children. It's growingly used on mobile devices and through an app, and that's also a particular part of its technical infrastructure and also economic way of functioning. But it's growingly part of popular culture. We now can see sometimes even in news media, in television, something that happened involving people from or contents or stories from this platform, and it touches particularly children's and young people's cultures. And while it is important as a cultural space, it's also, as we will go on to explore more, it's also a very, very commercial space. So it's very influenced, and we cannot really take the two aspects apart. So we will see this as a part of a process of platformization of digital media. So what did we do? Please, Sally, if I'm taking more than, I'm getting close to 20 minutes, please let me know. So for kind of the framing of what we did a critical literature review. We started this work some years ago, and we identified from 2013 to 2018, and we searched the terms like YouTube, YouTubers, social media, children, youth, and literacy on the web indexed databases, Scopus and Web of Science, and we found 36 articles. Then we also felt that we needed to add more like specific publications, books, as reference for this field of thinking about the phenomenon of YouTube. And you can see those 4 here. Then what we did was to read those, produce notes, each of us, then exchange those notes and start to build an idea of what are the main problems. So we can talk about challenges or problems here. What are the topics that are linked with some kind of challenge to this constant use of YouTube? Thinking of children and young people in particular, but not just them. But if you think about them as a more susceptible group, then you can also think about the wider population. Then when we updated this work in 2020, last year when we were writing the chapter, we extended for some more literature and also checked statistics and some news media. So to try to frame, as you will see, things that are being talked about as problems, but even though they are not in the academic literature yet. So these were the four main challenges that we identified. And I will go through them in the order of what is more clearly present in the literature to what's more emergent. So one aspect that is talked about very much is data exploitation. And this links us to the aspects of the algorithm of YouTube and how it works, the lack of transparency of YouTube as a platform in its functioning, in its economic model. But also we can say from this important work from Andreevik, which was not in our literature review, but is something that helps us to think how the platform exploits not just content creators, but also the users. So there's a lot here about the labor of audiences and how it generates data for the platform. The second aspect that is in a way linked to this is the ultra-commodification of digital culture. We can say that there's a lot of aspects that are commercial on YouTube content, on the space that it creates. And this is not a problem per se, but it means also that public issues have less space. So we identify this as a mirror problem. The third aspect is the pseudo-intimacy between the influencers, the content creators, the YouTubers, and the audiences. And we ourselves, Lydia and me, have been working more on understanding these processes better. They have to do with recognizing the kinds of affective and emotional labor that YouTubers have to engage in, the kind of pressure that they receive from audiences, but also the pressure that they put on audiences. Follow me, please hit the subscription ring, etc. And then also how this is key to then co-opt, to then make money in different ways, as I will go on to speak a bit later. And the fourth aspect of this is the harmful, extremist, and misinformative content. And this is also related with problematic interactions in the platform between they can happen between YouTubers and audiences, but also among YouTubers, etc. Things like trolling, bullying, harassment, and the hate speech. And so this we found that was a very, very emergent topic. There's less literature, but it's also very problematic. And I think also for today, and speaking with MeLCi LAB, this is a key issue. So from this, we proposed the agenda, and also in 4 key topics. The first is to promote knowledge about the platform. The second, about advertising on YouTube, how it operates and how it is also key to the model. Then the third about influencers and content creators and communities or followers. And the fourth aspect, the ethics and well-being online. These four topics, I'll go to detail, are what we feel are the most urgent, more relevant aspects for to promote literacy, focusing on YouTube. So the first, to generate and to promote knowledge about the platform. This is related with four, we said, four different elements. One is to promote knowledge, I mean, opening up the black box of YouTube and to create more awareness about it, how it operates, so that someone who does some search or just goes on the platform and finds some recommended videos does not accept that as something that is the best content, but something that is there because of previous use and because it's something to get us to also generate data for the platform. The second aspect, the social media tools, which are again crucial to support the algorithm, is something that was not from the beginning so prevalent on YouTube. So YouTube first was more a repository of videos, of content, and then it's growingly more and more a social media platform. So this means there's a great investment from the platform and the creators also to get users to engage in doing likes and comments and shares, etc. The third aspect is the audiovisual resources and features from YouTube. It's heavily invested and it has also evolved as an audiovisual platform. So they have specific services like YouTube or Premium. They have introduced or expanded the use of live content, which is something more prevalent on social media these days. And the fourth aspect is the what we call do-it-yourself culture, how YouTube incentivized users to become creators. So the first days of YouTube were more about getting people to see, to share, even if on Facebook or other media. But then how the model incentivizes people to upload, to create content. They have specific programs like YouTube creators. They have spaces and studios to support the emergent creators. They call the YouTube spaces. We don't know how that is going on in this COVID world. And also everything from the model of how they compensate creators. So, because creators mostly don't make money with advertising on YouTube, but with partnerships. So this means that, again, this is inviting the content to be more and more commercial, because the channels, the platform itself doesn't pay enough to have a content that is more independent. So we think that generating and supporting more knowledge and awareness about these four aspects would support more awareness and a more conscious use of YouTube. I'll go quickly through this one, advertising on YouTube, just to say that we distinguish and feel that this should be more widespread knowledge, that there are different forms of advertising circulating, and that they also generate confusion among users about how people make money on the platform. So you can have paid advertising, so the kind of ads that show up on YouTube. You can have proprietary content from brands, and they can be engaging and they can be successful among audiences. And then you have this third kind of content of advertising, informal content. And this has, as I said, been growing and also from the kind of model that YouTube has. So this links us and gets us to talk about consumer literacy, the need for consumer literacy, and I will touch back on this point at the end. The third aspect, please stay with me, I'm getting there. The third aspect is about the, as I said, the influencers and the audiences, the communities, the followers, or even, yeah, we will touch a bit on that, audiences who are not supportive. So here we identify the processes where influencers are led to, are invited to be creating a certain kind of relationship with audiences in their presentation, in their self-presentation. We see that there's aspects of self-branding there, how people are producing themselves as brands, and this has lots of implications also for audiences, how they compare, how they present themselves. I mean, we would like to know more and research more, but this is why we feel it's important to look at these aspects. Also the pseudo-intimacy, so the aspects in which influencers try to engage and get the audience to feel like they know them because they expose themselves, they give information, they show and tell a lot about their personal lives. So this ultimately results in an idea that these personalities, influencers, content creators, YouTubers, are authentic, are perceived by the audience as being authentic, and also close. They're similar to any type of audience. And this has hopefully positive consequences in the sense that, for instance, brands will fund them for advertising because they feel that the audience will identify with this content, but it can also have negative aspects. For instance, something that we are starting to research in Secant about influencers being more aggressive, being more, offended by audiences than in celebrities, for instance, because they feel, so audiences feel that they're so close that they can direct any kind of comment to them. So the last point, and I would like to spend a bit of time here, is ethics and well-being online. As we said also from the misinformation and aggressive kind of interaction, this is not something that is very researched yet, but we feel that it's very crucial, and also thinking about the children and young people's audience. So we draw on a definition and conceptual, definition by Burr and others, where they say that the ethics can be thought as something that helps to promote an information society that is open, pluralistic, tolerant, equitable, and fair. And we can think of well-being online as something that includes the impact of digital technologies on what it means to live a life that is good for a human being. So taking these concepts and these definitions into account, we think that for the space of YouTube and for thinking about an agenda on literacy, two main aspects could be considered. One has to do with the kind of content and the interactions. So things like, is a user being offended or being a bystander to an offense? What should they do? When and how to react? Is that clear from YouTube? Is that clear to an ordinary user? What are the moderation policies? So how does YouTube operate or how does it support creators to deal with this kind of comments or interactions? Also, how there's a need for a discussion on the regulation on YouTube, and also more accountability, more definition about its responsibility for the kind of interactions that happen there. Also aspects of consumer protection that have been discussed in the last years regarding the, I cannot think of the word, the disclaimers about advertising, using advertising in the content, and also the role of content creators in in producing content and in this kind of definition of policies. A second aspect has to do with those same content creators being considered themselves for their well-being. So we know of more and more cases where YouTubers have had breakdowns, mental problems, just because of how they cannot deal with the precariousness of their jobs. And that is sometimes a consequence of how the algorithm works and how they try to operate there. And also how they are prepared or supported to deal with aggressive interactions, or that they themselves start some kind of aggression towards others. So to conclude, as I said, we feel that there's different kinds of literacies that are related when we think about YouTube literacy. I mentioned consumer literacy, so we can think about that as something that has to do with the user recognizing the need for a certain product or service, the way in which what is presented to them is seen as satisfying that need, and also the fit to the kinds of resources that this person has. So I may need something, I may feel that this product would satisfy my need, but I don't have money for it. So in specific for children and young people, this might be problematic. It also relates with algorithmic literacy or data literacy that is more and more talked about, information literacy, a more fundamental and more developed researched kind of competence, and also civic literacy. So I wanted to state that here also, because there's a lot to learn and to educate about in regards to the kinds of interactions, what is acceptable, what is not. So I could leave a question also for discussion before you have questions for me, which would be, how would you help us think how we can take this from identifying an agenda to an intervention to actually have an action? So that's just a suggestion. So thank you very much and look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Muito obrigada, Ana Jorge, for this very comprehensive and profound presentation. Now we will ask the participants who have been joining us during this session to ask questions in Portuguese or in English. How do they prefer? If necessary, since we have both Portuguese speaking people and non-Portuguese speaking, sorry for this discrimination, but there are people from different nationalities besides Portuguese. At least I'm seeing here a few PhD students from Lusofna as well. But perhaps I have a first question just to warm up before others may take over. And I'll do it in English. Anna, even if your expertise is in children, in young people, from these issues that you have identified, for instance, regarding specific literacy, aiming for questions such as understanding algorithms and other questions which are more, let's say, traditional social media literacy. But do you think that what is special, what is different of young people and children, which we might not find in older generations? in terms of addressing these issues of media literacy?
Good question. So if we think that they are developing their competences in every kind of way, maybe also Maria José can engage in the conversation. So they're also building an idea about their identity, their place in the world, etc. So I think I've been particularly interested in the consumer aspects because the consumer literacy aspects. I mean, it would in many ways it has to do with their awareness of their place in the world. Sometimes they don't recognize intention in something that an adult would see, and that's for consumption or advertising, and that's also for aggression and everything else. But I would have to think more.
Very well. Agora, se calhar, passava a palavra a quem quisesse fazer uma intervenção, se calhar até colocar a questão diretamente
Mesmo que em português.
Mesmo que em português.
Sim.
So, please, now in English, please feel free to ask questions or clarifications if you feel that way. There's some of you who are also experts or researchers in the area of media literacy. So also to bring your own expertise, your own experience to this discussion, I also believe could be, so Cassia Irish raised the hand. Yes, Cassia, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, and thank you so much, Ana Jorge, for this beautiful presentation, very enlightening. I would like, actually, I'm not sure if it is a proper question or maybe a reflection and actually collaborating when you mentioned that, okay, so let us discuss and let us reflect from the very end of your presentation. So it's very clear, YouTube has a very strong business model of monetization, of making money out of adolescents' participation and perceptions. And when you mention about the freedom of producing content in a model that has been thought to generate money out of it, which is actually not aimed off those adolescents and teenagers in a way that it should, I don't think this is a fair model, right? You mentioned UNICEF in one of your references, and I've been working with UNICEF now 1.5 years, and UNICEF has a clear concern on the ethical component for YouTube and different social media. When it comes to child protection, when it comes to mental health, it's one of the key issues now. And I remember while interviewing some young people from my PhD thesis, they mentioned that those who are not in a good place actually to discuss very contradictory issues should never be engaged in such discussions, because they would be running the risk of committing suicide. And this was about the political polarization in Brazil. So just to sum up, I would like to say that that poses a very important challenge to us, how to discuss and to fight organizations like YouTube. When I mean fight is, of course, it's not a proper fight, but with a very disproportional ammunition. So it's knowledge against capitalism, against money. Thank you very much.
Célia, responde agora?
Yes, probably. Then the Conceição Costa will raise the hand, but probably it might be adequate for you to elaborate or to answer to these questions that Cassia just asked.
Yeah, thanks so much, Cassia. Yes, so as you say, it would be a fight against capitalism, and we also should recognize the opportunities that YouTube has given to. I mean, traditional television was not offering enough for adolescents, for instance. That's how maybe they turned to YouTube for content. But there are different issues, and problematic. And I would just say even from a research aspect, that this needs more research, the kind of polarization aspects, the misinformation. We had one case in the news that we found about extremism from the most popular YouTuber, PewDiePie. And we need more research on these kinds of topics. And mental health, yes, it's more talked during the last year, I would say, but it needs more more research and also more advocacy for it. So I'm not sure I'm giving an answer, but I'm agreeing with you. Yeah. Thanks.
Obrigada, Ana. Obrigada, Cássia. Conceição, please, please intervene.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Anna, for an excellent presentation or agenda by now. But my first question, since I'm also working on the media literacy and media education areas, is what do you mean by algorithmic literacy? I mean, in the context, of course, of media education. And maybe a second question, but it is related. Do you think, and if you want to share the answer with other colleagues, for me it's okay. Can we put everything into the media education, and how? Because you know, at least in Portugal and most European countries, this is transversal, a transversal competence. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the second one, yeah, obrigada, Conceição. So the second one, it's all about education, and it's not just focused on YouTube, of course, but also because it's so relevant for teenagers and for their culture. Maybe start from there to get to others, in the same way as Instagram. So to get them to think about something that they have on their everyday lives would be very important. But I agree with you that very much is requested of media education. So everything I didn't include here, but we could have financial literacy, everything, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's about education more broadly. About algorithmic literacy, it's about getting more awareness about what an algorithm is and what are the consequences for our media experience on YouTube or in other forms. So how is this affecting the kind of content that we engage in, and the idea that it's very much based on our choices is it's very naive. So we need to take that away from children and young people. And also about data literacy, what do we generate as data and how it is used for purposes that we don't control. Yeah. Thank you.
If I may, before someone else puts forward another question, the last question that Anna asked in the presentation was about action, taking action, making interventions, and that's quite an issue, because it's difficult to fight, as Cássia was saying, to fight with the same degree of efficiency from this side of the barricade, in a way, because the interventions might not only be from the educators, from professors. Also, there is the role of regulators, the role of media companies, the role of big tech companies. So there are here many stakeholders to be, which are part of this complex ecosystem. National and for instance, I have some experience in small-scale projects. Some of them national, with national scope, of others with international scope, like the project Rethink, which addressed issues like far-right extremism and Islamic extremism and disinformation, and the need for critical thinking in order to have people to be better equipped to at least to put some questions forward, and not to be so easily mistaken or easily manipulated by this avalanche of information and disinformation which surrounds all of us, might we be older or younger. But again, probably you and also have some concrete ideas of what should be done in micro, macro scale in order to tackle this problem. Can you please elaborate a bit on that?
Yes, and I would like very much that Lydia would also participate. When I did my postdoc on media education, my main concern, our main position was that media education cannot work alone because it needs also regulation. So it's also a big, I feel, it's also a bit naive to think that if we just work on education, that we will empower users enough to face everything that is going on without regulation. I believe that we do need that. And for instance, in the consumer protection aspects, we feel that that's more, that's more evident at this point. As for concrete aspects, yeah, from what we saw in 2 to 3 years, we feel that there's a problem that is not present in research. So if that's happening in research, that's even lagging more in policy or in getting this to programs in schools or something like that. So this just is emphasizing the challenges that they need to keep up with lots of changes. I see that this action could be both through formal media education and also through informal and non-formal. I believe in that also because Maria Jose made me believe it. But yeah, so even sometimes through the content of YouTubers themselves, I feel like more awareness should be raised in different kinds of ways, at the same time that regulation should also happen. Karim was first, I think.
Karim, yes, can you please go ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for the presentation. I have been following your research for quite a while now, and I'm really fascinated of the whole new world of YouTube open to me. My question is, however, the generation differences. Have you mentioned if so-called millennials, like people who were born in the 80s, at the end of the 80s and upward 2000, perceive the aspect of content monetization, which is obviously happening on the YouTube? Is that something that they are, like, have been raised with and just float in it because they know how it functions, or that's something that they like draw in during actually the appearance of producers? And we narrow down it's just to the influencers because it's what you are researching about. Did you mention this, like how they perceive the aspect of content monetization?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
So I'm trying to give an example then. Like when influencers create content, they create it in some ways that actually raise the amount of viewers, and they have the techniques how to produce the content that actually make them money. Is that something that influencers of the generation of millennials have like they just know how to do it, or that's something that they learned by doing?
Okay.
Yeah, that is my
thanks.
question.
Yeah, sorry, Karin, thanks. Yes, I think we could include that in the area of self-branding. And what we have researched, for instance, as I said, for the first generation, they were very much learning as they went along. They were not just commercial YouTubers, but they started to be sponsored by a big telecom, and then started to do some sponsored content. So the ways in which they convert the audience into profit for themselves, there's not much transparency there for the users. And also it's not very clear how those processes happen for an everyday person. So sometimes they will do some videos just to say that YouTube doesn't pay that much, just to say that they're doing this because they want to, and to seem more genuine, to look more genuine. But I'm not sure I would put it as in the terms of generation. As you said, like the generation of millennials, I'm thinking more of the generation of YouTubers. But now I think they're getting more and more professional, while it's getting more and more obscure for audiences to understand how they make money.
Carla Souza also has raised the virtual hand in this case. Carla,
Yes.
Forza.
So first, Anna, thank you so much for your presentation. It was a lovely insight on YouTube, which is the biggest phenom of our generation, I believe. My question is a bit in line with what Cassie was saying, because YouTube also has, I think, a representation side that you already mentioned. You know, I know that some people from this generation never heard about feminism, representation, equality, if this wasn't for YouTube. So my question is, in what extent, and since we can fight capitalism, I'm assuming that, in what extent could YouTube be the answer to fight YouTube? So if we raise awareness through YouTubers, could this be the weapon to fight like polarization and inequalities and mental health issues among youth?
Thanks so much, Carla. I think we get to new thinking when we pose new questions. Yes, there's some space for activism, and that's also important for youth culture. So, for instance, these first WTF ambassadors, the Kiku YouTubers in Portugal, Kiku, other people, they have this. There's a phenomenon inside of YouTube. It's very popular, and it's the coming out videos, when they present to the audience that they're actually gay, and they have talked to the families, etc. And there's literature on that as well. It's something. It's formatted according to the YouTube platform, of course, but it's more space for these kinds of issues to rise. At the same time, there's more and more evidence about how YouTube privileges the kind of middle class white creators and the kind of content that doesn't pose problems. So research in the UK is showing that, also in the US, also because it's more profitable for brands. So I would say that it's, and I think I had the same question this week in a lecture I was giving. There's some space, but it's very hard. It's very hard because it's not as easy for audiences. The platform itself is not so, it's not promoting that in the same way. But at the same time, there's a bit of space that wouldn't happen on television or anywhere else. So we should carry on. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Maria José Brites also wants to ask a question to Ana Jorge, please.
Yes, so sorry, my virtual hand is not working. So, so Thank you, Anna. Thank you so much for this inspiring presentation. I have two questions. One is if you could talk a bit more, and perhaps Lydia, if she wants to, about pseudo-intimacy between influencers and audiences in regard to your own research, because this is not an easy thing to operationalize. And related to that, the ethical questions, but in this case, in relation to research. If you could talk a bit
Do
on
you
this.
mean how we could research this topic, or how we
Yes,
could research
yes.
with ethics?
How you did that research within your own YouTube research, and how this relates to ethics in research, because this is one of the most pressing issues, the ethical questions of research when we are doing online research. So it was.
Thanks so much. So I'll start with that. For instance, in the case of studying the teenager with a YouTube channel based talking about her experience after cancer, because she started the channel, she calls it Careca TV. That's because she was going after the surgery and the treatments. We had more concerns in that case because of the vulnerability of the situation, but it kind of applies for other cases as well. So for this one, we don't include images in the presentations or in the publications. We also, yeah, in the, what was I going to tell you about? I'm going to look at the list of publications because I want to say something else. Oh yeah, we actually discussed this in a panel when conferences were real, because there's a thing with, okay, so they are creating on YouTube, they are seen by, you know, thousands of people, and then they're under 18. So supposedly we should not include those images in our presentations or publications. But if it's so visible, then why shouldn't we be allowed also to look at that? So we feel that, for instance, in Sofia Bebeauty, in now Sofia Barbosa, it's a different situation also from the Careca TV, because she's, well, one, she's older, and secondly, she's producing those kinds of images herself, and mostly for commercial purposes. So there's not as much vulnerability there as in the other case. So we decided to include some stills of her videos for publication. To actually research on the aspects of ethics, I think will be more challenging. So maybe that's why it's so emergent, but we will consider that for our future work. For pseudo-intimacy, it has to do a lot with, so I'll try to paste the publications here if someone's interested for when I have the next question. But it has to do with the self-presentation of YouTubers and how they try to create this perception among the audiences, and especially in the case of teenagers and their audiences. This is interesting because it's about identity construction, what kinds of aspects they highlight. And here we can say that they highlight mostly, you know, the aspects of lifestyle and not so much civic issues to try to also think with you about this. So yeah, we can share the publications if someone's interested in that particular aspect. Lydia raised the hand.
Yes, Lydia, can you also, okay, voila. We have no sound. Probably you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, it's okay now?
Agora sim, força.
Okay. No, it's just to complement a little bit about the personal, the intimacy, the pseudo-intimacy. In one of the articles that we published, we discussed the kind of information that the YouTubers share, especially young girls YouTubers. We can summarize in 4 kinds of information. They share where they are, with whom they are, what they are doing, and what are their tastes, their cultural tastes. And of course, when you know all this kind of information, of those personal information about someone, you feel much closer to this person. But usually the audiences don't think about that all this information is very planned. There is a strategy behind all those sharing, and this is how we think we know about their lives, but actually all the information or most of the information are planned and um, they think about how to share this and how to put this in authentic way, or at least in apparent authentically way. So this was one of the things that we discussed in our paper about intimacy and how they construct this.
Muito obrigada, Lídia.
Lydia.
Anna, do you want to elaborate a bit more, or?
No, I think we're close to the end. So you will close when you want, Celia, but I'll just say that I've left the references in the chat if someone's interested, or any kind of ideas about YouTube. We have researched more on influencers than on YouTube as such. This was an approximation about literacy. But thank you very much for having me and us.
Muito obrigada, Ana. Muito obrigada.
Muito obrigada.
Se não houver mais questões, if there are no further questions, I think it was a quite lively discussion with several interventions. I would then ask Maria José to wrap up this session, and also to invite you all to be again in a couple of weeks here in a new webinar in the realm of MeLCi LAB. Maria José, obrigada.
Okay, so thank you so much, Anna, and also Lydia. It was really inspiring and a good way to end the week. And just to let you know that soon we will have the webinar in our YouTube channel. Okay, so then we will also disseminate and at least in second we will make this information out. So on the 16th of April at 4:30 at 4:30 p.m. Our new invitee is Ana Pérez Escoda, that is lecturer at University of Nebrija in Madrid. And she will have a presentation on tackling fake news from media literacy, perspectives, challenges, and proposals for university students. So it's on the 16th of April at the same time, 4:30 p.m. And of course, we will also make this information out through second channels. Okay, so please join us again next month, and thank you so much again. And have a nice weekend.